Okay, welcome everybody to our hands-on Marketing Cloud Mondays. Today we're going to be covering some use cases that were shared in the community. Before we get started, let's talk about some upcoming events. Uh, we've got the Agentforce Marketer Series, their URL. I think you're all probably familiar with the global bootcamp group that Yosina is putting together. Another fantastic session on Agentforce Marketing Series this Tuesday and Thursday. Actually, that's a typo. It's 4/17 for the second one on the MCI. So tomorrow you've got the automated personalized conversations. And then Thursday, you've got the Unlock Power of MCI. We also got a colleague this Friday presenting on custom automations for wrapping up the Automation Studio Bootcamp. And then for those who attended on Wednesday's in-person call last week, we just want to give a shout out. We've got a project management workshop coming up, in-person session on May 14th. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. And then, like we mentioned today, we've got three sessions to dig into use cases. And if it makes sense, we can invite somebody to go right in the platform and help build out those use cases. We've got Kaylin from joining to talk about solutions for attribution of journeys or marketing activities in the environment. Try to dig out more information that we can typically get from the individual email results. So we'll have him dig into that use case. And then something that came up last week are, how to do custom fonts in Marketing Cloud, different paths forward on that. And then also a topic that came up in our session on Wednesday, which was bounces and seeing different paths to prevent, still utilizing maybe those soft bounces to prevent alternatives to emailing, like print backup. So yeah, so I figured maybe we could start off with Kaylin, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but if you want to introduce yourself and talk about, maybe you could share a few minutes about your use case and what you're looking to try to solve.
Yeah, so I'm Kalen Moss. I run Minute Admin, and we are a consulting and training, marketing cloud consulting and training company. And mainly right now, we have a client who really wants to attribute all marketing, emails, uh, campaigns back to the sales pipeline, basically. So they want to be able to say how many dollars can we attribute to marketing. So what is the ROI of the emails we're sending out? What's the ROI of the actual campaigns we're running? Um, and what is our ROI for that? So how much money do we have projected to make in the upcoming quarter? How much have we made? What are all of our closed estimates? What are all of our still open estimates that are coming from um, basically that are basic all of those dollars, how are those being attributed to what we're sending out in Marketing Cloud? So um, hopefully that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you're looking to get that attribution on this in the Salesforce CRM side, right? That's where you're looking to try to pull in that data and refine that, particularly in the sales environment, Sales Cloud environment.
Ideally, yeah, ideally we would be able to tie that back to a specific contact record. Um, and then you could run those reports in Salesforce and say, um, hopefully you could be able to run all of that. But even might even want to send that back to the campaign object and look at, how much money are these campaigns making
Yeah.
and report on that as well. So probably more than likely sending it back to the campaign object, that'd probably make the most sense. And then you'd be able to report on the campaign object, but drill down. I'm assuming probably based on contacts. See, I don't know exactly how you would probably even set it up. So maybe that also may be uh, some help that I could get from you guys on, where do you push that data back to? Do you push that back to the campaign object, then drill down into contacts, or do you just push it straight back to contacts? Um, but I don't think contacts would be the best area to push it back to. But then again, I may not know what I just don't know. So.
Gotcha. And then when you're talking about contacts or leads, as far as, so I'm assuming well, last question for just as far as basic metrics, are you currently leveraging the individual email results, like where you can get the send and the click and, like the subject line, that basic information? Or are you at the point where you're not even capturing that basic information on the individual email results on the contact or lead object?
So right now, I think what would be really helpful for me, we're not gathering anything yet. I think right now what would be the most helpful is even just creating the ERD for the data model of how it's all going to even work. Just to
Sure.
be able to say, okay, here's the plan.
Yep.
And then once we actually have a plan on, we're pulling data from the individual email result object, and then we're going to combine that with maybe a send log or some data view information, and we're going to push that data back. I think just knowing which objects we're going to pull from so we can actually gather that data would be really helpful. And then being
Okay.
able to create an ERD around, okay, here's the objects from Sales Cloud, here's the objects from Marketing Cloud, here's the inner joins or the left joins or whatever we're going to do. Um, and this is where that data is coming from. I think that would be, and I think also adding in that extra layer of knowing that there's going to be parameter tracking, UTM parameter tracking, more
Cool.
than likely. I think just having all those layers for me right now is just kind of like, where do we even start in terms of how do we, what objects do we pull? How do we combine that with UTM parameter tracking? And then maybe even Google Analytics. Um, so yeah, I just I think it's a little overwhelming for me right now.
Okay, awesome. This fantastic. Let's do an ERD exercise. I think that's just fantastic. So I know we've done ERDs with this group about a couple months ago. I have this doc opened up where we were gathering data from different. We were looking to pull in. We've got community signups for this community, which doesn't include an email address, and we were trying to pull in email addresses from a form and all of that. So this was with this discussion, but we can. I'll just copy that, and we'll start over here a little bit further down in this documentation. Okay, so let's start off with your email sends from Marketing Cloud. And then let's put in here, you mentioned contact object, and let's do campaign, and let's do the individual email results object. Okay, and we'll start there. So to contact, we'll start with just change that to contact object. I'm just going to put in the ID and probably going to want to put in the email address for now. I think. Um, that's good. We'll just leave the rest of these blank for right now. Sorry. And then this is going to be this is the individual IER object. That's its ID, contact ID. And then let's take a look at the let's just take a quick look at the IER and see what fields, the starter fields that you have that are available for you to take a look at. I just need to go find we're in our sandbox environment. I just need to find a record that has an IER send in there. We could look at the object manager, but let me just see. I think some of these should have records. So we can just see some base data fields in here. We can just add it to that object structure. Let's see. Okay, so we've got, some the basic information that's in the IER, and Kaylin, let us know, what's going to be helpful. Obviously, it sounds like date sense going to be helpful as far as a really basic KPI.
Yeah, let me actually grab the KPIs that are the most important to them to the client. Let's just see here real quick. And then I'll just put it in the chat here. So
Okay.
okay, here we go. I'm gonna just put this in here. Okay. Let me just put it in the chat. Okay, went over a little bit on the word count, so give me a second. Okay, I just put it in the chat. There's about 10 different metrics. The first one, or the first five metrics are customer metrics, and then the second five metrics are revenue metrics. So response rate, so the number of customers who directly responded. Okay, yeah, you have that there. Okay.
Okay, response rate, the percentage of customers who directly responses to the message. So now is that response rate, is that a particular responded to the SFMC inbound message, is that a actual click or is that an open? Is that a click of a particular link on that message?
Um, I would assume it's more along the lines of either a click or someone actually replied to that message.
Okay.
But I would more so assume that it's probably they've clicked a specific link.
Okay.
Um, that's probably the call to action that they're looking for them to
Okay.
click.
Fantastic. So that brings up I think we'll just start here as far as like this is your basic um well so we've got that metric, the book customers, the total number of customers who have booked an appointment within a selected time frame. Now that actual booking, is that happening? Is Marketing Cloud managing that, or is that something like a third-party system is doing that booking, but they just need to pass like in a UTM parameter, some sort of link that would link it to that email click that got them to be able to book.
That'll be the latter. Basically, the UTM parameter will go to that external system and then we'll determine whether they booked um, because of clicking on a link inside of Marketing Cloud.
Um, So you might need a way to pull in from a third party that attribution that's passed in the UTM uh, back into Salesforce
Hmm.
to connect that. So you've got the click, you've got that going into that third party system, but to be able to validate that that click was an actual application, that needs to be pulled back into Salesforce. So let me just add that down here as another object or another, so we've got the third party. Booking appointment. So this is going to be UTM from SFMC, and then you've got like a booking ID, and hopefully you've got a contact ID. So not only is Marketing Cloud providing a UTM tracking code source-wise, it's also providing that contact ID so that there's a linkage. There's linkage with coming back into Salesforce. Okay, so let me just change the color of that. I'll just try to change that. Okay, so that's the second point. All right, let's just work with these two for right now, as far as um, how to um, attribute a click on a specific link in Marketing Cloud so that we can validate back to the contact and we can also validate back to the campaign that you're able to get that attribution. Does that make sense to start there?
Yep, that would
Okay.
be great.
Before we dive in there, any questions or any suggestions as we're working through this from anybody on the call? Any questions what we've covered so far?
I think the question that I have is for number two here, booked customers. Um, so let's say that the booking software was, let's just say it was Salesforce somehow. If someone, booked in Salesforce, I'm assuming we just would get rid of that third party object and we just push this back over, we'd push that UTM back over to that specific Salesforce object.
Yeah, do you want to say this could be like an experience cloud environment where that booking software might be a portal that you created in Experience Cloud?
Yeah, let's say it was that. Yeah. If I mean, I'm not sure if that's what it's going to be, but I guess my question is, what is the logic pretty much the same, whether it's Experience Cloud or some third-party tool?
Well, it'll be awesome if it's in Salesforce because it's just that natural that natural connection. But I don't think it would be that much different if it was a third-party system. As long as the data connects back and forth, I think it still could work.
Okay.
Yeah, I think generally, if I can pipe in just for a second here, what I always try to do, especially with tracking parameters, is almost use it like a traditional lead source field. So whether that is an experience cloud site or a third party software, ideally they'll have some place where you can capture what the value is coming over from your tracking parameter. So, we can say that this particular campaign, we'll give it a name, whatever it is. So that third party software can still extract that name and attribute it to the booking, at which point that they would then provide that back to you. If it's in Salesforce, great. We can just pop it right into a field on a custom object or wherever we're going to be putting it. If it's a CSV, you just get a column there, so that way, regardless of how you're kind of setting it up, as long as you can get that tracking parameter that you're using to identify it, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can do it on the Salesforce side. Ideally, natively, like Tim said, but worst case scenario, you get a CSV, and then you can use some automation to hopefully adjust those records afterwards, maybe on a batch process. So a huge spectrum, obviously, lots of different ways to do it. But really, I think personally that's the big thing that I'm always thinking of when I hear these kinds of projects is how am I going to get that flag and how am I going to be able to then manipulate it afterwards?
Okay. And I guess a follow-up question to that is, so I'm just thinking through the logic here. I think of it in terms of phases, right? So, um, let's say that so basically Marketing Cloud, you can set up these, UTM parameters inside of an email. Um, and you can add those UTM parameters to the end of links, right, inside of your emails. And then anytime someone clicks on those links are then pushed out to, let's say, Google Analytics or like, so let's say someone clicks on your website. So now Google Analytics picks up those links. Um, Or let's say someone goes to Experience Cloud picks up those links. Or let's say it's a third party booking software, that third party booking software picks up those links. So either, no matter which area it's going to, wherever it's going to, whether it's Google Analytics, Experience Cloud, or that booking software, every single time the logic is always that booking software, that external place it's going to will always pick up whatever the parameters are from Marketing Cloud. Is that correct? Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah, it's like this. You see this Lucid chart URL.
Yep.
So this is the page right here, and this is the invitation ID. It doesn't really matter. This doesn't really mean much to you and I, but here's two separate parameters. So this in the URL when you click from Marketing Cloud, an example could be you could have like the journey ID, right? That could be one thing that allows you to, if that was helpful to pass an Experience Cloud into capture in that object, that could be one thing, that you could, for every single one of your links, you would know the ID of that journey and you could pass that. And then you have like an ampersand, and then next one could be, a good one would be contact ID, right? So that's something that's, facing to anybody in the world. They wouldn't really care what a 003 number would be, right? So that'd be another parameter that you could pass. Experience Cloud could capture and store that as a variable in the record that you're generating for that booking appointment, or, in Google Analytics as well. So you just keep adding those ampersands and setting those variables, and you could just use AmpScript to populate each of those variables depending on the IDs at time of send, or when you're creating that content. So yeah, that's that's an illustration of how that could be used.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Cool. So I'm starting to build this out. Thanks, Matt. And any other questions or any other thoughts while we're starting to work this out?
So is it just a matter of knowing that other software and how to actually, it sounds like it's kind of like a glove. You have to make the hand fit inside of the glove, so to speak. So it sounds like you have to just know how Marketing Cloud UTM parameters work, and then you have to know the other system that you're using and how those collect those UTM parameters. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a combo. You've got a bunch of different resources here. So you can use UTM parameters, right? Exactly like you said, how to translate the data how to populate that data when you're clicking and sending over that information. And then how to receive it where you're receiving it, and then how to take that data and then push it up to your analytics side of it, your reporting side of it. But you might use a combination of UTM parameters. You also might use the data that naturally gets populated to Sales Cloud from Marketing Cloud at time of send in the individual email results object. So you might run into a blocker with UTM parameters where, I'll give an example. I mean, you wouldn't do it, but you wouldn't want to put email address and use a UTM, right? You can encrypt certain things, encode them if you needed to, if email address was the identifier, which you wouldn't want. But there are some values you might need to encrypt, and then you need to be able to decrypt them. So if you have a data point that you don't want to publicly expose and you can't encrypt it, then that's where you might look to populate data at time of send in the individual email results. You're keeping that closed loop system and you're not using UTM parameters. Matt, does that make sense as far as looking at those two options?
It does, absolutely. And I think it's really great that you brought up, email address and identification, because you really, for attribution, you need to know who is interacting with your form, in addition to that how, right? Because I think, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I think you mentioned tracking indirect responses in your needs as well. So if you've got this form where your records are coming through, right, best case scenario, we send an email, they come from the email to the landing page, they submit the landing page, we know who they are, and we know that they came right from our email, right? So we can attribute that fairly easily. You're going to have other folks who might be coming to this page from other sources, not your email, who aren't part of the campaign. So we don't necessarily want to attribute them to your marketing campaign, because that's going to muddy your waters about what's our return here, right? That was just an organic submission. The toughest thing that we're going to try to identify is people who maybe got that email, sat on it for a week, called their sales rep, and then converted manually. So how do you attribute that behavior back? And I think that who that Tim is mentioning is identifying who's been sent this is great, because then you've got that IER and you've got that data underneath. And then later on, once the easy stuff is kind of picked up, you can start identifying, great, who are these folks who are in our campaign and converted, but not through that ideal path, and how do we join that data together? So really important, like Tim mentioned, knowing who this is, in addition to what campaign they're in as we're sending these messages.
Now, would you do that third process that you mentioned later on in the project? Would you say, this person was sent an email 2.5 weeks ago, didn't, go through that ideal path, called a customer service rep, booked, through that process. Is that something that you would set up at the original outset of the project, or is that something that you would set up, you know, later on in the?
Yeah. I think it is going to be need dependent, right? What's your speed? I think that is more complex and can be more difficult to put out, but I think it's absolutely something you want to be thinking about from the start, architecture wise, to make sure that you don't kind of, wall yourself off from it from the start. And I think the objects that you and Tim have both mentioned here are great for doing that, right? So if we've got our campaign object where we're able to store some of this data, we're going to have campaign members where we can store whether they are responded or not. You can go back afterwards. Like we can send an email, and if they click, mark them as responded right away. Or maybe we can set up an automation later on down the line that if the contact is in this campaign, they are a campaign member, and they have a opportunity that closes. We can then check to see, are they a campaign member, and if they are, then we can mark them as responded if we want to. So I think that the automation opportunities are really endless. So I also don't want to get too complex up front. But by thinking about this, and I think doing this ERT diagram is a great example of how you can kind of get everything on the table at once to think, okay, how are things going to interact? If this campaign's launching next week, maybe I'm not thinking about that kind of post hoc analysis right away, but I want to make sure I've got that capability at least. So it's kind of use case dependent. I know that's kind of a cheap answer. But I think you definitely want to be cognizant of it up front at least.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Okay, so I'm just starting to start to map out a couple of these different paths that we've been talking about related to that email content send. So UTM parameters, when they click and they go to this Experience Cloud booking object, so we're sort of taking a couple of steps here in that they click on the right link, they go to that Experience Cloud page, they fill out that appointment, and then an object gets created. We're just going to say it's this is all within Sales Cloud, but it's being hosted by Experience Cloud. That's where the object's being, populated. And so that's where you're going to be able to get that journey ID, contact ID, and campaign ID here. And then your campaign ID, that's where the linkage between your campaign and this campaign, get that connection. Same thing with the contact. I'm just not going to link that there because it's just not really laid out well. So there's that path, the UTM path. And then the other path you can do. So I think it's helpful to take a look at the out of the box IER objects, which they're good. There's some handy stuff here, so you get this date that was sent and date that was opened. Clicks a little bit, needs a little bit more to, kind of not the best. Total number of clicks and links clicked. So in your use case, you want to attribute a specific click on that email, right? You don't want to, it's not going to be a success if they click on subscribe or they click privacy policy or they click an information or the logo. You want that specific link clicked that goes to to that cloud page, to that Experience Cloud page or your third-party system. So to do that, and Matt and I've talked about this, and we can, there's the documentation. I'm happy to go through this in another session. You can have at time of send the email content. Let me put in the send log here as another object. Data extension. So we'll put the job ID. I'm just going to make there's 4 in unique records for each send. Well, in the send log, we're just going to use job IDs for right now. And then we're going to say journey ID and then click alias. Let me just delete these 2 rows, 3 rows. Okay, so at time of send, the journey ID is going to get populated to the send log and the click alias as well. Hold on a second, I just plug in my battery. So at time of send, you're going to be populating the send log, and that's a 1-to-1. And then you're going to run an automation that's going to connect the journey ID and the link alias. Oops. So you would create in the individual email results object, you would create a field called appointment click, and you'd create a field called journey ID, and you'd run an automation that would populate those values after the email has been sent. So you'd have that journey ID, you'd have that click alias. You could also add in the campaign ID as well. And then that can be attributed back to, let me just add that in real quick, just so that's complete.
Thank you, Matt, for that link. And since we're th that link is so relevant to this, um, in relation to ERD diagrams, are there any ERD diagrams available for how Marketing Cloud connects to Sales Cloud? So that whole entire integration?
Not off the top of my head. I know Matus and Susanna both have great data view ERDs out there, but it's a good question about that. I know Susanna's done some stuff with the Marketing Cloud connector, so let me take a quick look out there.
Okay.
And I will say, just for anybody following along with the recording, the link that we just sent in the chat, I'm not sure if that comes through or not. That's from Tim's blog, handsonsfmc.com. It's how to write tracking data from Marketing Cloud to Salesforce. And it really outlines the automation that you'll create, the custom send log values. I know I've used it before. It's just an awesome document on how to kind of make this happen.
Yeah, it's super helpful. I actually just used one of a documentation similar to this from you guys on pushing sales or marketing cloud data back over to Sales Cloud. Um, so it was a combination of server-side JavaScript and then the session you guys did with Robert Winter on synchronizing the email opt-out field from Sales Cloud to Marketing Cloud and vice versa, back from Marketing Cloud to Sales Cloud.
Super helpful.
Yeah, very.
Okay, Keelan, does this give you at least a starter ERD to show a couple of your options there? So you've got UTM, and then you've got, send log population of records, and then using the individual email results object to build out that data that you're looking to, capture beyond those default fields, and then, ultimately attributing this all back to the campaign. Now, the attribution back to the campaign, there's some steps here to get that attribution in there. So you might write a script in CRM that calls all individual email results objects with this campaign ID, and then it populates, a total number of clicks or appointments or whatever on that campaign object, in particular records that you need to populate, but at least the data will be there, either, written to the IER or written to the campaign.
Yeah, that's super helpful for that data to be going back into Sales Cloud. Um, yeah. And then so I'm guessing so with this ERD, I would follow the instructions that Matt sent or that link that Matt just shared from your post on how to push that data back um into Sales Cloud.
Yeah. So I mean that covers this part, which is you you create a field in the send log for those values that you want to capture, right? Journey ID, click alias for that particular click, and the campaign ID. Then in your email content, in using AMP script, you just set the variable to the name of those fields in the send log. And then at time of send, you'll get the journey ID from the journey that you're sending. The campaign ID will come from the journey as well, because you're probably pulling in that campaign member from either a Salesforce send or a query send, so you'd have that ID. And then obviously that link will be hard coded, right? It's a particular alias that you're naming that one link in your email that's going to that appointment, cloud experience cloud page. So you would just set those three variables in AMP script. And then as it's sent, you would verify in your send log, oh, I see those three values being populated. Then you would just connect the IER record to, there's an IER object that's synced in the Marketing Cloud environment. So you just find the IER record based on this send, and then you go back and you populate the IER object with an automation that you could use an automation to run a script to populate that field in CRM, or you can create a journey to update the IER object with those particular values. So.
Okay. And so I'm clear, I've looked up documentation on this, but if you run a script activity to populate a CRM object, that doesn't count towards API limits, does it?
That is correct. That's what we've heard.
Okay.
I mean, I had a client where they were doing a significant amount of script and also object activities in journeys, updating fields from Marketing Cloud to the Salesforce environment. And they had, in this enterprise, they had different parties that were watching those API call limits on the Salesforce side on a daily basis. And they had to, check in with them and say, hey, these are how many calls we're doing on a daily basis. And yeah, our Salesforce professional services rep said, no, those are because they're within the family, they don't count. But that's what they said. So I think it's worth, that was Salesforce professional services. Definitely want to trust them. But I think it's always good to double check on that for sure with, if you're working with if you be able to just confirm that with the account executive, things change, so.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. Um, and then my follow-up question is, what if we're populating the journey with the Salesforce data entry source and not this, or sorry. So when you choose the Salesforce data entry source, but you don't choose the campaign object, you actually choose the, you know, um,
Contact.
yeah, the contact. How does this change since we have the campaign object over here being populated? Like, how does that change this ERD?
Would you still need attribution back to the campaign that contact's in, or was the campaign no longer part of the mix?
I guess the question would be, would you want to, I guess, so like the preliminary question before that is, would you even want to have campaign? Yeah, yeah, actually, you know what? Yes, we would still want that person to be a part of the campaign because we still want to report based on campaigns inside of Sales Cloud.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you could, there are many different paths, a way to do that. I mean, it obviously gets complicated if there is a one-to-many relationship with a contact and, multiple campaigns. But if you've got that contact ID, you could, in your email content, you could do a lookup to the campaign and you could find that campaign member and you could pass that, campaign member and also the campaign ID, set your variable in your email content there. So you don't necessarily have to have that in the data extension for that Salesforce send or your query send. You could use AMP script to do a lookup to the campaign based on that contact ID.
Okay. So
Yep.
you'd use AMP script to look up that contact ID, and then you would, I'm assuming from the retrieve Salesforce object function, is that, and then you would populate that AMP script variable, and then you would send that back over to the contact object, right? Or,
Yeah, so if we take a look at campaign members, um, the sync DE, you should there will be a contact ID in there. So this is what you would do a lookup to. So campaign members. And so you would look, you would do a lookup to the contact ID, right? You'd find that contact ID match, then you'd be able to pull in that campaign ID right there. It depends on whether you want that or the campaign member ID, whichever value you're looking. So once you've got that, then you would just set that campaign ID um, variable in the send log, and then it would track same way. You could populate the
Mhm.
IER object from there. And then if you need to also populate that data point on the contact as well, you could run an automation that updates the contact, or at time of send in the journey, you could update that contact with the journey ID. Ideally, it would be on that object, the contact object anyways, because the IER would be that related object sitting on that contact as well. So it's still there as well, but um, right in the IER record, you'd have, here's that contact ID, and then you would have these multiple fields in here, the journey ID, the link alias, the campaign ID. So it would be in multiple places in CRM, and you could either use a script or custom reporting to get that all tied together.
Okay. I'm just taking a note here. From a high 30,000 foot overview, it sounds like the key skills to make this happen are one, understanding the data flow, two, AMP script, three, SSJS, and then four, Automation Studio pushing back to the CRM. Would you say those are high level skills that you have to have for this?
I mean, I think if you can get this all done with UTM parameters, then that might be all you need. So
Okay.
if you can go that path, then that's just UTM parameter, logic And like you've mentioned, the connectivity of how that talks to where that link is coming into, whether it's the third-party system or your Experience Cloud. So if you can parse those parameters when you receive that click and populate all those fields, then you're good to go. So
Hmm.
outside of that, then your next step would be, yeah, you'd want, obviously creating data extension fields in a send log. That's, pretty straightforward. But yeah, it would be AMP script, and then the automations that you would need to populate those values in the IER object, journey logic as well. And then SSJS, you probably wouldn't need SSJS. The only SSJS you would need is if you wanted to use that. And I think I've got a blog post on that as well. Is there's an SSJS code to update objects in Salesforce CRM from an automation. Use a content block by key to do that. And you just need some basic SSJS logic for that. But yeah, not so much on the SSJS side. Luckily, it's kind of a weakness on my end. So,
Okay. All right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is a great start for me. I just needed to kind of see what the journey logic was. Or sorry, not the the entire data flow logic from beginning to end. So this is really helpful. Thank
this is awesome. What a great use case. Thank you for bringing this to the group.
thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else have any other thoughts? I know we're at time. We can cover those other topics, the fonts and bounces in another session. Uh, any questions? Any thoughts? Okay, cool. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks, Keelan, for joining this wonderful use case. And we'll see you all next Monday.
Thank
Thank
Thank you. Have
you.
a good one.
Bye.
thank you.
you.